must have been very interesting growing up with a father that had crossover into two major entertainment fields. But I think the most appropriate question, because your father is one of the most renowned professional wrestlers of all time, so you really had a lot of exposure to the way that McMahon in particular orchestrated his system, the way that Bischoff did his system. Can you compare the similarities between the way professional wrestling operates to the way professional politicians operate?
Such theater.
I would say that probably professional wrestling is much more honest about who's the villain, who's the good guy.
Right.
It's probably the same amount of soap opera drama, the same amount of over the top performances. But honestly, like at least with wrestling, you pretty much know who the villains and who the heroes are. Where in politics, somebody can come up and be like, wow, this person's got some serious, like great ideas. And then they completely let you down once they're in office. It's very similar to politics, I think, in that behind the scenes, I think a lot of the fight you see in politics, maybe not as much today. I mean, a lot of the fight you see in politics, I think, is a lot of it is pure theater, especially when it comes to passing laws that cater to the upper 1% in corporate America. Both parties pretty much are lockstep, especially when it comes also to the military industrial complex. And so though these two parties will kind of sit and bicker and fight and talk about how much they hate each other and how we don't get along and like wrestling, they're still going out and having dinner in the same restaurants. They're getting courted by the same lobbyists. They're buddy off camera. Especially when it comes to very specific, important issues in this country. That's why it doesn't matter who's president, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, you'll see foreign policy doesn't really shift. It doesn't really change all that much, regardless of who's in office. And that, to me, is a pretty good example of where, wrestling and politics are similar, is that, backstage, they don't hate each other. Not to the extent that they pretend to be on TV. Because at the end of the day, they're paid off by the same corporate interests, both parties. The same lobbyists are at both conventions every year. And because, it's hedging their bets. Doesn't matter which party's really in control, because ultimately, I mean, you'll get differences, I think, on social issues and things of that nature, obviously. You'll see much more party lines when it comes to the vote and what people get behind. But when it comes to the business of America, for lack of a better term, when it comes to that kind of, the awful foreign policy that we practice, when it comes to the military industrial complex, when it comes to Wall Street, when it comes to things like this, those two parties are very lockstep. They might differ on the fringes, but ultimately when it comes to those things, which directly affect taxpayers far more quickly even than some of the social aspects, in terms of trying to live the American dream, that's where a lot of the real problems lie. And I think that's where actually wrestling and politics are very similar. But yeah, I mean, I prefer wrestling because, I'm paying them my money to put on a show. Politics puts on a show and takes my money and spends it on things that I absolutely detest.
Yeah. No, they're all friends. They're all everybody, because this is a class war and we don't have a labor party.
Yep.
So those two parties are inevitably funneling the same. They're just spewing different crap, but all roads lead to the same exact thing. And I think that what you're saying about foreign policy is true, but I also think it's domestic policy. Nothing changes really. No, I mean,
no, it really doesn't.
The money is just, it's been siphoning more and more and more. The wars have never going to stop because what we do is war. That's our only real industry here is arms. So that's never going to change. And so,
Say never.
Well, as long as we're dealing with the two parties that are there, like going back and forth between, we're talking about the similarities between these two parties. That's what I'm saying. So it doesn't matter who's in the White House. It doesn't matter to a lot of extent who has the majority in Congress. It's like this big theater, and all that's happening is money's getting siphoned to the top and the wars are continuing.
Yeah.
That's what I see.
And I agree completely. That's all you see happening pretty much on a constant. I would say you'd have to go back probably until in and around the JFK assassination.
That's what he
maybe
always
a little bit
said.
before that. Before that, I think you had, at least some differences going on. But, once the JFK assassination took place, if you really pay, maybe Carter's administration, maybe. But ultimately, these two parties are pretty much lockstep when it comes to the issues that you just laid out. And that's heartbreaking, but that's what happens when you're given the choice between Coke and Pepsi. Ultimately, it's the same cola. It's both fizzy, but the colors are different and the mascots are different.
I would argue Pepsi and Coke are more different than Democrats and Republicans. Actually, I can actually taste the difference between a Coke and a Pepsi. I'm serious.
I think that you could. I put it like this: on certain social issues, I think that the parties are very different on certain social issues. Obviously, when we talk about things like the right, pro-choice and things like that nature. I think on a lot of those issues that I think there's enough people in the two parties that kind of, clearly they're not lockstep, but those are also the issues that, while wildly important, they love kind of playing up those two issues as kind of like a sleight of hand trick. Let's get people distracted by this over here. Not that it's not important, shouldn't be focused on, but if we can kind of keep people battling over social issues, it distracts them from how lockstep we are when it comes to the business of government. And I use that term in regards to the siphoning of blue collar and middle class wealth in this country when it comes to the military industrial complex and things like that. Like, we don't ever want them to think about that. No. So it's easier to kind of distract them with the important social issues that we're dealing with in this country on a cultural level and on a law level. Like I said, I don't mean to kind of water down. I don't mean to say that those aren't important. But if you notice, all of the energy is put towards that. And none of the energy is put towards shining a light on the corruption within our government of both parties, or on the corruption of the military industrial complex, on the corruption of Wall Street, and the siphoning of wealth in this country that constantly flows upwards rather than outward. Or even down, downward, it's never going to flow. But geez, even if you could just get it to spread outward a little bit, they're never going to allow that. Sorry, I go off on a tangent.
But, no. And I think that the Democrats, I think it's even worse than them just sort of like using it for, that's their source of fundraising. I actually think that that's the reason they never bothered codifying it. I think that they always put it off because they always knew that when they totally screw the working class and the economy, that they'll always be able to dangle that and scare us with the big bad Republicans taking away our right to choose. I also think that they were very generous in approving Republican appointed judges and didn't fight at all to get judges appointed that would have been more favorable to that. So, they can say that they're so different on those issues, but then I see when the same week Roe versus Wade is overturned, where's Nancy Pelosi? Oh, she's down in San Antonio campaigning for Henry Cuellar against Jessica Cisneros, and he is an anti-choice Democrat. So it's like, then you don't get to then say that you're the pro. They could say they're pro-choice all they want. I don't see them doing anything for that. So then at what point does that even matter? Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.